So you want to know a bit more about Zahn, eh? Well, sit on down and I'll recount a story of one of Zahn's most cruel characters. Born to Nancy Filme, one of the head nurses at the Zahn Asylum for the irreparably troubled, Trevor Filme was conceived while his mother was working. Soon after dumping a wheelbarrow full of bodies into the cliff, she felt a kick that sent her kneeling over, and out popped little Trevor, only feet away from an endless fall. Now, not only is the abyss of the cliff daunting enough for a backstory, but Trevor's father was one of the bodies that was being tossed into the never-ending darkness. Without a father figure and with a busy mother, Trevor found himself deepening his imagination. Once Trevor hit the age of 6, he began wandering around the asylum while his mother worked, and he adopted many pets and became friends with many of the psychologically insane. It was considered a normal day for Trevor to be spat on or screamed at, and there was a particular patient that reminded the boy he would bite his head off once he got free of his straitjacket. However, Trevor took these threats as jokes and began to joke back. His go-to threat was that he would sick his sump rats on the crazed inmates, reminding them that the sump rats are always hungry for human flesh. This would only make the freaks crazier for him, and he'd laugh and walk off as they struggled against their imprisonment. With a mind tethered to cruelty, there was one day that would change Trevor for the rest of his days. This day in particular, Trevor went stalking the sewers for new sump rats or other chemically mutated beasties he could bring home with him. After finding an aggressive razor chemhound, he decided to head on back home. On arrival, he witnessed one of his sump rats out in the front porch, its belly gorged and full. He hadn't fed his sump rats in quite some time, so he assumed they had teamed up on a dog. With his house door still open, he headed inside to investigate the situation further. Upon entering, his eyes took in all they could, and he began to dry heave. On the floor in front of him, 3 of his sump rats were picking at the remains of Nancy Filme. His mother's body was tattered and shredded, with limbs missing and blood spattered about. Her head, untouched, lay staring blankly at the wall. Trevor began to wail on his sump rats, grabbing them by their throats and ripping through their skin with his dirt-encrusted nails. In minutes, every sump rat was torn to shreds, some even with their heads popped cleaned off. Trevor stood, covered in blood and chem, staring in confusion at the floor. A rage he had felt ignited within him because of his mother's death. But it didn't feel wrong. With his new hound licking the blood and eating the remains of the sump rats, Trevor began to uncontrollably laugh. He felt so free. No more mother, no more rats, no more responsibility. He sat crisscrossed on the ground, falling back as his laughs grew more and more contagious. He then began to roll around, licking and covering himself in the crimson blood. After an hour or so of growing insanity, the boy stood and left his home. People on the streets watched in terror as they watched the young boy head towards his birthplace, the asylum. On arrival, he unlocked the gates and doors with his mother's key and proceeded to go into different patients' rooms. What happened in each room is hard to say, but Trevor killed over half the inmates that day and skinned them too. On the next sighting of him, he had a pile of disembodied skins in his hands as he walked out of the doors of the asylum. It is said he never returned home. Instead, years passed where Trevor was seemingly gone. No one had seen or heard of him, and the atrocities he committed were now a faint echo in conversation. It is said that the man has either disappeared or died at this point, but I think he is still out there lurking. I think he was up to something all those years back. Not much else I can tell you to fill you in, but if you ever cross him, beware. He's not only a maniac, but a trigger-happy one at that. You step on his toes, and next thing you know, he'll have you gutted and hung, ready for feeding to whatever hungry pets he has lying around.